The Council's power. The universe was once united under the rule of the Galactic Council, a vast governing body made up of the most powerful species in the galaxy. It was a time of order, peace, and prosperity. Every planet, every species, and every system was bound by the laws and decisions of the Council. From the icy worlds of the Rylar to the lush jungles of the Kylori, the Galactic Council's influence reached every corner of the galaxy. To many, it was a symbol of unity and strength, a beacon of hope in a chaotic universe. But what few saw were the cracks hidden beneath the surface, cracks that would one day bring everything crashing down. For centuries, the humans had been a part of the Galactic Council. At first, they were welcomed as equals, their unique abilities admired by the other species. Their quick thinking, their resilience, and their bravery set them apart. The humans had shown time and time again that they were more than capable of handling challenges, whether it was overcoming a deadly alien virus, defending against invaders, or solving complex political crises. The other species looked up to humanity as an example of what could be achieved when unity and determination were combined. However, over the years, things began to change. The human population had grown rapidly, and their influence within the Council was undeniable. But as their power increased, so did the resentment from other species. The other members of the Council, especially the older and more established species, grew uncomfortable with the humans' rising prominence. They started to feel threatened by humanity's ambition. Humans were becoming too powerful, too independent, and too bold. The human delegation, led by a charismatic leader named Captain Alina Gray, had been pushing for more rights, more influence, and more say in the decisions of the Council. It was a reasonable request, considering how much humanity had contributed to the galaxy's growth and prosperity. But the Council resisted. The other species were unwilling to give up their control, unwilling to let go of the power that had long been theirs. Tensions were rising, but most of the Council members were too proud to acknowledge it. They believed that the humans were simply being naive, that their requests were just a phase, something that would pass with time. But Captain Gray knew better. She had been to the heart of the Council's chambers and seen the corruption firsthand. The decisions made in the name of peace often benefited only the strongest species, leaving the others, especially humanity, marginalized. She had witnessed the Council's leaders making deals in dark corridors, cutting deals that hurt weaker species just to protect their own interests. To her, the Galactic Council was no longer a force for good. It had become an empire, one built on lies and manipulation. Captain Gray wasn't the only one who saw the problem. Across human space, whispers spread of a great betrayal. The humans were starting to realize that they had been given a seat at the table, but it wasn't a seat of power. They were treated like guests, not partners. The human colonies, the great space stations, and the military fleets, they were all growing. And as they did, so did the realization that the Council could no longer be trusted to protect them. In secret meetings, a plan began to form. High-ranking officials, military commanders, and influential leaders across human space started to speak openly about the possibility of leaving the Galactic Council. What if humanity walked away? What if they could survive and thrive on their own, free from the corruption and manipulation of the Council? The idea was dangerous, even reckless. But to those who believed in the cause, it seemed like the only choice left. The Council's representatives ignored the growing discontent among the humans, brushing it off as a passing phase. After all, they were a small, relatively young species in the grand scheme of things. What could they possibly do? The other species still held the majority of the Council's power. But what the Council didn't realize was that they were underestimating humanity's greatest strength, its ability to adapt and survive against all odds. Alina Gray was no longer content to sit by and watch the Council abuse its power. She had seen too many friends, too many allies, fall victim to the political games played by the other species. She understood that humanity had to act before it was too late. The Council was not a place for fair representation. It was a place for the strong to dominate the weak, and humanity would not remain silent any longer. As tensions within the council reached a boiling point, the human delegation made a bold move. They sent a message to the highest-ranking members of the council, stating that they would no longer participate in the decision-making processes unless they were given a greater role. They demanded fair representation, an equal seat at the table. The message was clear. Humanity was done playing by the rules that had been set by the other species. The council responded with silence. It wasn't that they didn't notice the message. It was that they were too proud to respond. To them, humanity's request was nothing more than an irritation, a challenge to their authority. The decision was made, and the council's leaders chose to ignore the humans' demands. But in doing so, they had made a grave mistake. Humanity had just made its first move. Humanity's growing discontent. As the Galactic Council continued to ignore humanity's pleas, things began to change across human space. The colonies, once proud members of the Council, started to feel the weight of the unfair treatment. Supplies, resources, and aid that had once flowed freely from the Council were now withheld. Humans were forced to find their own solutions, creating new trade routes and establishing alliances with smaller species, while the Council looked on, indifferent to their struggles. The more humanity worked on its own, the more they realized how self-sufficient they had become. The human colonies were thriving despite the Council's neglect. They were no longer dependent on the Galactic Council for their survival. People began to question whether the price of membership was worth it. The Council's rules were stifling their growth, and it became clear that humanity's future didn't lie in the hands of the Galactic Council. Captain Elena Gray, the leader of the human delegation, found herself growing increasingly frustrated. She had spent years working within the system, trying to make things right. She had participated in countless meetings, lobbied for changes, and even put her life on the line to maintain the fragile peace between species. But all her efforts had been met with the same cold response. The Council had ignored humanity's needs time and time again, focusing instead on their own interests. Elena began to wonder if the Council had ever truly wanted humanity to succeed, or if they had simply tolerated them because they were useful. The human race was a young species in comparison to the ancient civilizations that made up the majority of the Council, and perhaps that had been their mistake. The Council had never fully accepted humanity as equals. The humans were outsiders in a galaxy where the old powers controlled everything. With each passing day, the tension grew. The human colonies started to hold their own secret meetings, discussing their discontent with the Council. Political leaders, military officers, and influential businessmen all began to voice their concerns. There was a growing sense of unity among humanity. Unity in their desire to break free from the chains the Council had placed on them. The first signs of rebellion were subtle. Small acts of defiance, whispers of leaving the Council, and murmurs of creating a new future for humanity spread like wildfire through the colonies. These whispers turned into a movement that would change the course of history. Elena became the face of that movement, the symbol of a new hope for humanity's future. She spoke of a future where humanity no longer needed to bow to the will of others, a future where they could carve their own destiny. But not everyone agreed with Elena's radical vision. Some feared the consequences of abandoning the Council. The other species might retaliate, they warned. The Council had a powerful military, and humanity would be seen as a threat. The fear of war was enough to keep many people on the fence, unsure whether breaking away was the right choice. But as time went on, the weight of the decision became undeniable. Humanity could no longer sit idly by and accept the Council's refusal to treat them fairly. Elena faced fierce opposition, both within and outside her own people. But despite the challenges, she pressed on, gathering more support for the cause. She began to rally the colonies, sending messages to the leaders and influencers of every human-controlled planet. She spoke of the importance of self-determination, the need to take control of their future. Slowly, more and more leaders began to join her cause, realizing that the path they were on with the Council was leading nowhere. In the halls of the Galactic Council, however, there was no sign that anything was amiss. The leaders of the other species went about their business, continuing to make decisions that favored the strongest and most influential races. They refused to acknowledge the growing unrest among the humans, dismissing it as a temporary problem that would eventually fade. After all, humanity was small compared to the vast civilizations that made up the Council. What could they possibly do? But the Council's arrogance would be its undoing. Humanity had been underestimated, and that mistake would prove to be their greatest downfall. As more colonies sided with Alina's movement, the demand for a new path grew louder. The humans wanted more than just fair representation. They wanted freedom from the Council's control. They wanted to build their own future, one where they were not bound by the rules set by a system that did not understand them. The whispers turned into a roar, and soon, Alina stood at the forefront of a movement that had the potential to shake the galaxy to its core. The Galactic Council had ignored humanity for too long. Now, humanity was no longer willing to wait. In the deep silence of space, amidst the stars, the first decision had been made. Humanity would no longer play by the Council's rules. They would create their own. The moment of decision. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The human colonies, united under the leadership of Captain Alina Gray, had finally reached the tipping point. The whispers of rebellion were no longer whispers. They were a call to action, a rallying cry for all those who believed humanity deserved more. The Galactic Council, once seen as a symbol of unity and order, had become a prison of politics, corruption, and inequality, and humanity was ready to break free. Captain Gray knew that this moment would define humanity's future. It would decide whether they would remain caged within the Council's grip or whether they would rise above and forge a new path. She gathered her most trusted allies, the leaders of the colonies, military commanders, influential diplomats, and in a secret, heavily guarded meeting, they discussed their options. The stakes were high. The consequences of their decision could affect the entire galaxy. In the grand halls of the Council, the other species remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within humanity. They went about their meetings, making decisions that only served their own interests, never once considering the anger that simmered among the humans. But behind closed doors, the leaders of humanity were preparing for something far more radical. It was time to make a stand. Alina took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room. Every face around the table showed the weight of the decision they were about to make. Some were anxious, unsure of what would come next. Others were resolute, knowing that their future was at stake. One by one, they spoke, voicing their concerns, their hopes, and their determination. "We cannot go on like this," said Admiral Kane, a grizzled military leader from the outer colonies. "We've been ignored for too long. We've asked for a voice, a fair seat at the table, and we've been refused every time. This is the only way forward." "I agree," said Dr. Selena Ree, a prominent diplomat and one of Alina's closest advisors. "The Council has shown time and again that they don't care about humanity's needs. They view us as nothing more than a tool, useful when needed, disposable when not. We deserve better. We may not have the numbers, but we have the strength to make our own way," added Colonel Tobias Richter, a military strategist from the core worlds. "If we leave, the Council will feel the shock. We'll disrupt their entire system, and we will show the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated." The room fell silent for a moment. Alina looked at each person, taking in their words. She knew what was at stake. The fate of humanity lay in their hands, but she also knew that if they did nothing, the cycle of oppression and mistreatment would continue. The Galactic Council was beyond saving. The only way to ensure humanity's survival and growth was to break away and build something new. Alina stood up, her voice steady and confident. "We all know the risks. There's no guarantee that we will survive this. The other species will not welcome our departure. We will face retaliation, and it may very well be a war. But we can no longer live under the Council's thumb. We will create a new future for humanity, a future where we are in control of our own destiny. The room was filled with a sense of determination. It was clear to everyone present that this was the right choice. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for action had arrived. The decision was made. Humanity would leave the Galactic Council. Elena reached for a communications device on the table and activated it. The image of a massive, imposing alien structure appeared on the screen, the headquarters of the Galactic Council. The counselors within those walls had been waiting for humanity to bow to their will, to fall in line. But they would be met with defiance. "We're done," Elena said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "We are no longer part of your council. We demand our freedom." She sent the message. As soon as the transmission ended, there was an almost palpable sense of tension in the room. They had made their move. The message had been sent, and there was no going back. The other species would undoubtedly react. Some would call it a betrayal. Others would view it as a declaration of war. But Elena knew that there was no other choice. Humanity could no longer be a pawn in the Council's game. They had to walk away and take control of their future. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Military forces were put on high alert. Colonies made preparations for possible retaliation. Leaders held closed-door meetings to discuss the next steps. But even as the preparations for what was to come were being made, there was a sense of excitement in the air. Humanity was finally taking control, finally standing up for what it believed in. The moment of decision had come, and humanity had chosen its path. There would be no turning back. The fate of the universe was about to change, and the Galactic Council would soon find out just how powerful humanity truly was. The breaking point. The message had been sent, and now the entire galaxy was holding its breath. The moment humanity had walked away from the Galactic Council was a shockwave that would echo across the stars. For a brief time, everything seemed to stand still. The Council, deep within their fortified chambers, had failed to react immediately, perhaps underestimating the significance of what had just happened. But soon, the storm began to build. The first sign of trouble came when a fleet of ships, massive warships from the Council, arrived in human space. They appeared suddenly, as if they had been waiting for something like this to happen. The fleet didn't come with diplomacy. They came with force. The message was clear. Humanity's defiance would not be tolerated. Across the human colonies, the response was immediate. The defense systems were activated, and military personnel scrambled to prepare for the worst. The once peaceful world of humanity was now on the brink of war. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, humans did not back down. They had been treated as second-class citizens for too long. They had been forced to bow to the will of others. No longer. Admiral Kane, one of humanity's most trusted military leaders, stood at the head of the human fleet, staring out at the massive council ships as they loomed on the horizon. The Council had underestimated humanity's resolve. They thought the humans would buckle under pressure, that they would give in at the first sign of confrontation. But they were wrong. The humans were ready for this. "We knew this was coming," Kane said to his officers as he looked over the tactical maps. "Now we show them what we're capable of. This is our moment. We fight for our freedom." On the ground, in the capital of the largest human colony, Elena stood before a large assembly of leaders and military commanders. She could feel the weight of the decision they had made. This was it, the point of no return. The stakes couldn't be higher. But the fire in her heart was undeniable. She had no doubt now that the choice to leave the Council had been the right one. She had seen the injustice, the manipulation, and the lies. Humanity would not kneel any longer. "We may be outnumbered, but we are not powerless," Elena said to the gathered crowd. "This is our fight. We will defend what's ours, and we will prove to the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated. A roar of approval rose from the crowd, and for the first time in years, Alina felt the full weight of the hope and trust placed in her. The people were behind her, and they were ready. Humanity was ready. But the council was not a force to be taken lightly. In the depths of their headquarters, the council's leaders were not merely preparing a response. They were planning their next move carefully. They had underestimated the humans for far too long, and now they would make sure that they would never rise again. The council's military might was vast, and it would crush any resistance in its path. "We can't afford to let this slip," said High Chancellor Varel, the leader of the council's largest species, the Vrin. He stared out over the holographic map of the galaxy, his mind calculating the most efficient path to victory. Humanity must be broken. They cannot be allowed to think they are equal to us. The other council members nodded in agreement. The Vrin, the Accelerith, and the others knew that a galaxy without humanity under their control would be a galaxy in chaos. The humans were not just another species. They were an unpredictable force that had grown far too quickly, far too powerful. The council could not allow them to spread their influence any further. Within hours of the first warning shots being fired, the council launched a full-scale assault. The galaxy trembled as fleets of warships filled the void of space, bearing down on humanity's colonies. Star systems that had once known peace were suddenly thrust into the fires of war. The shockwave of the council's attack sent ripples through every corner of the universe. The balance of power had shifted, and now the humans were at the center of the storm. But in the face of overwhelming force, humanity refused to back down. The human fleet, though smaller and less experienced than the council's, fought with a fury that took even the council's military by surprise. Ships darted between the stars, engaging in intense battles that lit up the darkness of space. The human colonies rallied together, fighting tooth and nail to protect their homes. They had been pushed to the edge, and now they were fighting for their very survival. It was a war that no one had wanted, but it had come nonetheless. The first casualties were heavy, with several human fleets devastated in the early days of the conflict. But the humans fought on, refusing to surrender, refusing to let their future be decided by the council. In every battle, they grew stronger. They adapted, learned, and began to find ways to outmaneuver the council's fleets. It was clear that the council had underestimated humanity's ability to survive and fight back. The universe watched in stunned silence as the war escalated. The once mighty Galactic Council, a force that had ruled over the galaxy for centuries, now found itself at war with a species it had once thought of as insignificant. And with each passing day, the humans proved that they were more than capable of standing up to the universe's greatest powers. Chaos spreads across the galaxy. The war had erupted like a wildfire, spreading quickly and uncontrollably across the galaxy. What began as a single bold move by humanity had become a full-scale conflict that threatened to tear the fabric of the universe itself. The Galactic Council had underestimated the will and resilience of humanity, and now they were paying the price. Humanity, having severed its ties with the Council, found itself at war with the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But the human fleet, though still smaller than the Council's, fought with a ferocity that stunned the galaxy. The Council's warships, once seen as invincible, were now being outmaneuvered and destroyed by humans who had learned quickly, adapted even faster, and fought harder than anyone had expected. Admiral Kane, leading the human fleet in a battle above a newly colonized world, was the first to notice the change. The battle had been a fierce one, with both sides taking heavy losses. Yet, as the dust settled and the last of the enemy ships were retreating, Kane saw it. The humans were winning. They were no longer simply defending. They were pushing the Council forces back. "We've done it," Kane said quietly to his crew, watching as the retreating Council ships vanished into the stars. "We've broken their grip." But even as the humans celebrated their victory, the galaxy around them was descending into chaos. The Galactic Council, now desperate, called upon its most powerful allies. the ancient species who had ruled over entire star systems for millennia. The Xel'Rith, the Vryn, and others came to the Council's aid, sending vast fleets to crush the rebellion. These ancient species had the experience and resources to wage war on an unimaginable scale. They had fought countless battles in the past, conquering worlds, toppling empires, and ensuring their dominance. But even they were not prepared for the fight that humanity had become. The humans' ability to adapt, their relentless pursuit of victory, and their refusal to surrender took everyone by surprise. As the war raged on, humanity began to make alliances with smaller, less powerful species that had once been pushed aside by the Council. These species, seeing the tide turn in favor of humanity, rallied to the human cause, joining the fight against the Council's oppressive rule. The galaxy's once stable political structure was beginning to crumble as species that had been previously ignored or oppressed rose up alongside humanity. Yet even as new allies were gained, the toll of war began to weigh heavily on all sides. The once thriving systems that had flourished under the Galactic Council were now being torn apart. Planets that had once been rich in resources were now barren fields of wreckage. Entire star systems were devastated, with their inhabitants fleeing or being forced into exile. The war was no longer just a battle for power, it was a fight for survival. Helena Gray, standing on the bridge of the flagship Liberty, watched as the universe she had once dreamed of protecting began to collapse. She had led humanity to this point, but the cost was steep. The battle for freedom had come at a great price. Millions of lives had already been lost, and there was no end in sight. Yet, despite the toll the war had taken, Helena remained resolute. "We are not fighting just for ourselves," she told her officers. "We are fighting for the future of the galaxy, for the freedom of every species that has ever been crushed beneath the Council's boot. We will make sure their sacrifices mean something." Her words echoed through the crew, inspiring them to continue fighting, even as the situation grew more dire. Every victory felt fleeting, with the Council's forces coming back stronger with each new assault. But humanity had learned from each defeat. They were no longer just surviving. They were fighting for something greater than themselves. The universe, once united under the banner of the Galactic Council, was now divided, broken, and fragmented. New alliances were being formed every day, and the old powers were losing their grip. The Council's once unchallenged dominance was slipping away, replaced by the rising power of a newly formed alliance between humanity and its allies. The battlefields became more chaotic by the day. Systems that had once been peaceful now burned with the fires of war. The humans' departure from the Council had set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. As planets burned and fleets clashed in the darkness of space, the galaxy was witnessing its transformation. The once unified Council was breaking apart, and a new era was beginning. But amidst the chaos, Helena saw a spark of hope. Humanity's strength was no longer just in its military might. It was in its ability to unite others under a common cause. The galaxy was no longer divided into factions based on power. Species that had once been forced into submission were now standing side by side with humanity, fighting for freedom. They were no longer just pawns in the game of the Galactic Council. They were players in their own right. As the war continued, Helena knew that the end was coming. The Council's forces were slowly losing ground. The alliances humanity had formed were stronger than the Council had anticipated. Soon, the tide would turn in humanity's favor. But what would come next? Would the galaxy rise from the ashes of war, or would it collapse into chaos? Would humanity be able to rebuild a new order from the wreckage of the old? The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven its strength, and no matter what came next, the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity's silent return. As the war raged on, with each battle more brutal than the last, something unexpected began to happen. The galaxy, once divided by the dominance of the Galactic Council, was starting to shift. The human-led rebellion had brought chaos to the old order, and in that chaos, The seeds of a new galaxy were beginning to sprout. Humanity's departure from the Galactic Council had sparked something greater, a universal desire for freedom, unity, and self-determination. However, amidst the chaos, a new, unsettling truth emerged. Humanity was now viewed as a powerful force in the galaxy, one that could no longer be ignored. The Council had failed to break them. The war had not crushed their spirit or their will. Instead, it had only strengthened them, making them leaders in a universe that had long been ruled by fear and domination. Now, humanity was faced with a choice that no one could have predicted, whether to continue fighting and push for total victory, or to return to the table and offer peace, a new way forward for the galaxy. For Captain Alina Gray, the decision was not an easy one. As she stood on the bridge of the Liberty, looking out at the devastated worlds below, she knew that the war could not continue forever. The universe had already been scared beyond recognition. Every day brought more destruction, more casualties, and the potential for endless retaliation. The human fleet had been victorious in many battles, but they had also lost much. The price of freedom had been steep, and Alina could not help but wonder if the universe would ever truly heal from the damage caused. Yet, the question remained, could humanity fix what it had broken? Could they restore order to a galaxy that had been torn apart by the war? The answer wasn't clear, but Alina knew one thing: it was time for a change. One day, as she sat in the command room with her most trusted advisors, the message came. It was a strange, unexpected transmission, one that was not from the Galactic Council, but from one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, the Accelereth. This ancient species, once known for their warlike tendencies, had shifted. Their leadership had been overthrown by those who believed peace was possible. The Accelereth were asking for a meeting with humanity, an offer of negotiation, not war. The message was clear. We see now what humanity stands for. You are the future of this galaxy. We seek peace. Will you join us? Alina stared at the screen in disbelief. It was the first sign that the tide had truly turned, that humanity's actions had forced the galaxy's most powerful species to reconsider their stance. The idea of peace was now possible because humanity had made it clear that they could no longer be controlled, that they would not stand by while the old powers continued their reign of fear. After a brief, tense silence in the room, Admiral Kane spoke up. What are we waiting for? We've fought for this moment. The galaxy needs to see that there's a better way. Alina nodded, her mind racing. The war had changed everything. Humanity was no longer just a group of colonies. They had become a symbol of resistance, hope, and strength. But peace, true peace, was still an unknown. She had learned many things during the war, one of the most important being that strength alone could never guarantee peace. Humanity had fought to survive, but survival was no longer enough. The question now was whether humanity could lead a broken galaxy toward something better. The decision was made. A delegation from humanity would meet with the Accelereth and any other species willing to join in the peace talks. The message went out, not as a command, but as a plea for a new beginning. It was a call for unity in a time of devastation. The galaxy was broken, but maybe, just maybe, it could be rebuilt. As the peace talks began, something unexpected happened. Other species, who had once been in direct conflict with humanity, began to reach out. The Ryler, once fierce enemies of the human colonies, sent representatives. The Kylori, a species known for their intelligence, but once hidden in the shadows of galactic politics, offered their support as well. Even the Vryn, who had once been the face of the Council's military might, agreed to attend. Humanity had become a symbol of resilience, but more than that, they had become a symbol of hope. The old powers were crumbling, and a new galaxy was beginning to emerge. One where all species could have a voice, where they could determine their own futures without fear of domination. As the first round of peace talks began, Alina couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. The galaxy, torn apart by years of war, was now taking its first steps toward rebuilding itself. But the road ahead would not be easy. There were still factions that refused to let go of their power, species who saw peace as a threat to their survival. But humanity had learned something valuable during the war. They could no longer sit back and let others decide their fate. Elena stood tall, her eyes set on the horizon. The fight for freedom had been won, but the real work was just beginning. The universe had been shaken to its core, but now, for the first time in generations, it had a chance to heal. It was time for humanity to step into its new role, not just as survivors, but as leaders of a new era. The aftermath. A new beginning or total destruction. The peace talks had begun, but the galaxy was still on edge. The war had devastated countless worlds, and the scars it left would not heal overnight. Yet there was something unmistakable in the air, a glimmer of hope, a sense that, for the first time in a long while, the future might belong to a new kind of galaxy, one built on cooperation rather than domination. Elena stood in the command center of the Liberty, watching as the first formal discussions were broadcast from the Peace Summit. Representatives from the human colonies sat alongside delegates from the Accelerith, the Kylori, the Ryler, and even the Vryn, who had once been humanity's enemies. The tension was palpable, but there was also something new, a shared determination. They were all aware that the alternative was far worse, the continuation of a war that had already cost too much. "We've come a long way," Elena said to her closest advisors, her voice steady. "But we must remember that this is just the beginning. These talks are fragile. One wrong move, one wrong word, and the entire galaxy could slip back into chaos." Admiral Kane, standing at her side, nodded grimly. "We have to ensure that humanity's voice remains strong. We may have stopped the war, but we still have to prove that we are leaders in this new era. The galaxy can't go back to the old ways. We can't let the Council's mistakes repeat." The discussions had begun on a tentative note. The species that had once been at odds now sat across the table, facing the challenge of rebuilding a broken universe. Elena had spent hours addressing the representatives, emphasizing humanity's desire for peace, cooperation, and mutual respect. For the first time in galactic history, humans were not simply trying to survive or assert dominance. They were trying to bring about a lasting change for everyone. However, not all of the species were on board. The Vryn, despite their apparent commitment to the peace talks, were still cautious. Their ancient traditions and their long history of power made it difficult for them to truly let go of their old ways. They viewed the war as a necessary evil, something that had to happen to remind the galaxy of the true nature of power. Even now, their representatives watched the peace talks with suspicion, unwilling to fully trust the process. On the other hand, the Kylori, once a lesser-known species, had been enthusiastic about the talks. They had long been victims of the Council's power games, and now they saw an opportunity to ensure their voices were heard. The Kylori offered valuable resources, advanced technology, and knowledge that could help rebuild the galaxy, an offer that was quickly embraced by humanity. And then there were the smaller species, the ones who had long been oppressed by the Galactic Council. They had seen what humanity's defiance had caused, and now they wanted to be part of this new vision, a galaxy where no species would dominate the others. For them, the possibility of peace was more than just a dream. It was the only chance they had to survive in a galaxy that had been ruled by the strong for far too long. Despite the tensions, the peace talks proceeded, and gradually, the first steps toward a new order were set in motion. Elena couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and uncertainty. It was clear that the galaxy had been irrevocably changed. The old powers were no longer in control, and new alliances were taking shape. But the path to a true, lasting peace was still fraught with danger. In the midst of the summit, an unexpected voice interrupted the proceedings. It was a representative from a faction that had long been considered neutral in a war, the Ryler. Their leader, a shrewd and cautious species, stood before the table and addressed the gathered delegates. "You speak of peace, of a new beginning. The Ryler representative said. But you must understand, this peace will not come easily. The scars of war are deep, and the galaxy is not so easily healed. We are willing to negotiate, but we are also prepared for the possibility that some may refuse to accept this new order. Alina's heart sank. She had known that not everyone would embrace peace immediately. There would be those who refused to let go of the old ways, those who saw the new galaxy as a threat to their survival. But the words of the Ryler representative reminded her of the fragile nature of the peace they were trying to build. "We've been through too much to turn back now," Alina replied, her voice firm but weary. "We fought for our right to exist, to shape our future. We won't let fear or old grudges destroy what we've started. We're not the same as we were before the war. None of us are." The peace talks continued for days, with each species offering their own vision for the future. But as the discussions wore on, it became clear that the hardest part was yet to come, ensuring that the fragile peace held. The galaxy had been shattered, and there were those who wanted to see it stay that way. The first agreements were signed. Trade routes were reopened, alliances were formed, and tentative steps toward rebuilding began. The galaxy had a long way to go, but for the first time in centuries, it was moving toward something better. The old council had crumbled, and humanity's bold decision to walk away had sparked a new era. As Alina walked out of the summit hall, the weight of what had happened settled heavily on her shoulders. She had led humanity through the fires of war, and now she had to help guide them into the uncertain future. There were still challenges ahead. There would always be those who sought power, who tried to manipulate the fragile peace. But humanity had proven its strength. It had proven that it could rise from the ashes of destruction and lead the galaxy into a new age. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured, and the universe would never be the same again.